Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is to try one more time. That is a quote from Thomas Edison. Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmates, and welcome guests. At the age of 32, Thomas Edison had invented the electric light bulb, a working electric light. One of the greatest inventions in world history. Now, just 10 years earlier, Edison found himself without money on the streets of New York, no place to stay. You're probably wondering how he got from such lows to such success in a short time. Edison was born in Milan, Ohio in 1847, and at the age of 8, his parents moved to Port Huron, Michigan. And he went to school there, but he was an addled child. The teacher called him addled. And his mom didn't like that, so she pulled him out of school and homeschooled him. And she got all these books for Edison to read, and he just devoured them. His favorite book was a book titled School of Natural Philosophy by R.G. Parker. And this was a book that had experiments that he could do, a hands-on experiments. He took this book to his basement and would work on the electrical experiments, he would work on the chemical experiments, and it was really to his liking. At the age of 12, Edison got a job. The rail spur between Port Huron and Detroit was opened up, and his family was poor, so he went to work delivering newspapers, selling apples on the train. He developed a business savvy there, but he also learned a lot about the world. Detroit was a bustling city of 50,000 people. He learned a lot about how the world works, how people think. But he was mostly intrigued by the telegraph operators. You see, in the 1850s, it would take 10 days for a message to go from New York to London, England, and you'd have to send a message by a ship. So by the time it was halfway there, it was old news. Now the telegraph, a recent invention, could send electrical signals 20 miles within seconds. So Edison saw the potential there. The communication was rapidly improving, and he'd watch the telegraph operators as he was over on his train stops. One day in Mount Clemens, Edison rescued a 3-year-old boy who was almost run over by a stray boxcar. And this boy's parents, well, his father was a telegraph operator. So his father offered Edison lessons in the telegraph, and he taught Edison how to be a telegraph operator. Edison went and found a job as a telegraph operator. He liked the job in that he would work nights, and during these nights, when it was slow hours, he could read books, he could study and try and invent and experiment with his inventions. He didn't have a lot of money because he would always, when he'd get money, he would buy more tools and more stuff to experiment with. It wasn't until he decided he wanted to invent, and he wanted to make it so that you could send a message both ways on the same wire, that his supervisor said, well, that's foolish, you can't send a message both ways at the same time. But not only did Edison not listen, he invented a message that went both ways. He also invented where you could send 2 messages both ways at the same time. That was called the quadruplex. And he finally made some money off of that invention. When he did that, he purchased a piece of land in Menlo Park, New Jersey. He built a laboratory, and this was the first industrial laboratory. He actually hired like 10 to 15 men to work with him. Through a series of trial and error, they went through experiments in trying to figure out how things worked, what not would work. Now, he did get married. His wife, Mary Edison, was in the house, but Edison didn't spend much time with her. Poor Mary, because Thomas Edison went into the laboratory for days at a time. Sometimes he'd take power naps. If the men got tired, he'd play the organ over in the corner and try and liven things up. But there wasn't a lot of attention to his wife. She eventually died at age 29 from a disease. Within 1 year, of moving to Menlo Park, Edison was fooling around with a needle and some tin foil trying to get his voice to record, and he invented the phonograph. You probably all heard the story, Mary Has a Little Lamb, the first words. He spoke those into the phonograph, and he almost fell out of his chair when he heard it coming back at him. This was like an amazing, astounding invention that it actually worked. And Edison said this was one of the first times something actually worked on the first try. He's like, all my stuff takes hundreds of efforts. So this he thought something was wrong because it worked right away. Ironically though, he did not continue working on the phonograph. He set it aside. He was getting kind of burnt out. He went out west for a vacation. And out there he renewed and refreshed. He was out visiting William Wallace, who had set up a series of arc lights, which was 12 to 14 lights out in a foundry about a quarter mile from a mill. That the circuit came to the mill, and Edison looked at the lights and said, this is it. People have been trying to do 1 and 2 lights at a time, but if we can get a series of lights to light cities and schools, this would save people money. So Edison ran back and forth between the arc lights and was calculating how it would work, and said, I can do this, and we can get off coal and oil lights, we can use electric. Now the light bulb, the incandescent light, was actually invented in 1802, but it took 75 years before it was perfected. And one of Edison's quotes, he said, nearly every man develops an idea and works it to the point where it looks impossible, and then they get discouraged. That's not the place to become discouraged. So he took these other guys' ideas and he worked them through trial and error. And I've written a couple quotes on here to see the type of guy Edison was. Genius is 1% inspiration, and 99% perspiration. He also said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that will not work. So he kept going, he kept at it until he succeeded. He always thought there was a way through it. So he was refreshed. He came back to Menlo Park. He hired up more men. He had 25 men. They went through, after about 3 months, they had everything set with a light bulb except the filament, which is the piece in the light bulb that lights up to 4,500 degrees. He was trying to get it to last. They burn out after time because it's so hot. He used the best vacuum pumps to vacuum all the oxygen out. He was using platinum, but platinum was very expensive and it would only last about 10 hours. It was never going to work as a commercial light source or a residential. It wasn't until he was there rolling the carbon from the oil lamps between his fingers and said, I think I'll try this again. He tried it before, but now he had better vacuum pumps, so he put a carbon filament in and it lasted for 13 hours. Within a few months he had the bamboo carbon filament, which lasted 1,300 hours. So now he was on his way to becoming rich, successful. He developed a series of systems, power system as generators that could light cities, but he never gave up. He lived to be 84 years old, and he kept inventing. He invented 1,093 patents he had. And over the last 130 years, not much has changed to the light bulb. It's pretty much the similar design. We're finally going on to CFL. His invention paved the way for a long period of light bulbs. In my opinion, there were 3 key things that drove Edison to success. Number 1, his confidence. He didn't quit, despite people telling him no. His work ethic. And finally, he loved what he did, since he was 8 years old in that experiment book. I'll leave you with a final quote from Edison, one of my favorites. He said, I never did a day's work in my life. It was all fun. Might we all try to have fun like Mr. Edison? Back to you.